So to start off with the intro, hi, it's Stitch from Black and Black Times Infinity. We have Prodigy, and we have our special guest today. We call her Momma French. We have decided, just as our own individual podcast groups, to just sort of share our experiences that we had growing up, dealing with just racism and civil rights, mainly provoked by a lot of the incidences that we've been seeing on TV with most recently George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and just all the
and the girl
Breonna Taylor. Yes,
right.
yes, absolutely. And it just seems to have sparked a lot of talking points in terms of everybody in the community wanting to get together and work with the whole Black Lives Matter movement and getting everybody to be treated as equal. Just me personally, I sort of did some self-reflecting to just remind myself that my parents, well, my mother more specifically, grew up in Virginia during the Civil Rights Movement, the South. For those, some people don't realize it. I mean, we have international listeners, and they assume that the South is just geographically the South and everything, but it's essentially like the Mason-Dixon line. That's Maryland. I mean, even though it looks like it's up kind of northeast-ish, it's still considered the South and everything. So hearing her stories and things that I wasn't even aware of or even asked her specifically, I just wanted to reach out to some of my other friends growing up, especially you, and I'll ask some of your background stuff so our listeners and viewers can kind of know a little bit about it. This is hilarious because you've known me since I was walking around and said, playing t-ball baseball and everything.
That's right.
Yeah, went to the same church, so it's this is just, I'm sure it's got to be just tickle pink for you. Yeah, for me to just sit here interviewing you about this, but I think it's important that people just understand everything that is going on and just hear these stories from people that lived it, rather than just reading it in a book or seeing a Hollywood movie version of it, just hearing a raw edited version of it. So we obviously live in Fremont, California on the West Coast, but if you could just share a little bit about your background. And I know you're never supposed to ask a lady their age.
That's right. His mom.
Yeah, just where you grew up and then a little bit about that.
Okay. My name is Cheryl Williams French, and I was born and reared in Montgomery, Alabama. And Montgomery's city moniker is Cradle of the Confederacy. So that establishes.
I didn't even know that. We're 2 minutes in, and I'm about to write down notes.
And they have one of their proudest buildings is what they call the first White House of the Confederacy. This little house where the first president of the Confederacy lived, and maybe he was the only president. I don't know. But anyway, so when people come, people go there to visit in the old days. And it was a place that have some of the best people in the world, really, but also some of the worst people in the world. When I grew up in the 50s and 60s, there was definite segregation. There were, oh my goodness, constant reminders to black people. At that point, the South was solidly black and white. There were no other ethnicities there. And there was always the opportunity living in the South where the undercurrent was you're black, you're in those days Negro or colored, and you're not as good as we are. So we will try to suppress you and oppress you. And so that's just the way things are. Everything was separate and unequal. There were separate bathrooms what they really had was men, women, and colored. Now they didn't care whether black people went to the bathroom, men and women at that point, but just for white people, men and women, and then colored. And there were all kinds of signs of the Confederacy and all this. For people who lost the war, Montgomery was a place where they celebrated the war and ancestry, their history of being what they call rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all the schools were segregated. I went to private school, though I went to a Catholic school there. But the underlying spirit was racism and white supremacy. But as often happens with black people, we did live separate lives. And in our daily living, we were always overcoming and supporting each other and celebrating each other. And they protected the children from the real harshness of segregation. Mm-hmm. We had black doctors, black dentists, black lawyers, black teachers. So we were kind of insulated. By we, I mean my friends and I, and most of the children. We were insulated in our community, and we felt good about ourselves. There were white people over there that we never interacted with. And then in our community, everybody, you know, we took piano lessons and ballet lessons, and you had everybody that you needed provided the services that you needed.
Okay.
And my parents were, my father and his friends had been to World War II, so they were veterans, and they came back and they were able to take advantage of all the GI Bills that were really instituted for white veterans, but they had served in the military, so they got a chance to go to college on the GI Bill and all those things, or finish their education.
Can I say one quick
Oh,
thing?
yeah.
From all that I've read,
Mm-hmm.
Grandpa was very fortunate to be able to access that, because a lot of black World War II veterans weren't able to access that on purpose. So I just
I have heard that myself, and I most recently one of the NFL quarterbacks was talking about why, and we'll get down that road later on, but about why he felt it was inappropriate and disrespectful to take a knee, and he cited, he's like, my grandfather was in World War II, and I found it disrespectful.
That was Drew Brees yesterday.
Yes, and some people were saying, one of the Michael Wilbon, black journalist and host of PTI, was like, my father fought in World War II. This was in, I assume, maybe South Carolina or Chicago, I think. But he's like, when they came back, the GI Bill failed us. Yes. So it's interesting to hear that how it worked for some people, it might not have worked. So it's sort of like a dice roll.
Yes, that's right. Right. It wasn't designed for black veterans.
Okay.
But some of them were able to get in and use it for things like purchasing homes.
Okay.
Now it's funny because my mother often said, we purchased a home, but we couldn't get house insurance. In those days, Allstate wouldn't even insure black people in the South.
That's interesting.
Now we got the guy from Major League.
Right. And he's from San Mateo.
Oh, yeah.
Dennis Haysbert.
Yeah.
He is the voice of Allstate Insurance. Right.
That's hilarious.
Right, but they couldn't get house insurance. So there were always these constant roadblocks that, even on subtle levels, we were overcoming and didn't realize it. But everything came to a head because Montgomery, I remember I was maybe in the first grade when the boycott started.
Okay.
Bus boycott. And I remember.
I'm sorry. I
keep me on track.
No, I don't want to keep you on track. I just
yeah, thanks, Lynn. And you might have to put the fan on.
That's fine. I got it. So, obviously, when you are brought up in your childhood, was there like a moment, or did you have like?
Lynn, you gotta get it out of the basket, the little remote.
Did you have like a sit down talk with like your parents when did you realize that because you were black that you were not as equal? Was it a moment, or it was just sort of like anything like in your early childhood where it's like you had a sit down talk with your parents?
No, we never had a sit down talk. It was just the underlying culture.
Okay.
Although we had a thriving, beautiful culture within ourselves, we knew that the greater culture was, you have to hit high. Yeah, he's got it. The greater culture said we weren't good enough. We couldn't drink out of these water fountains. We couldn't sit down in Woolworths. I'm really dating myself. They don't even have Woolworths anymore.
Woolworth is like a CVS or a Walgreens kind of
or a
drugstore.
Five and Dime.
Yeah.
And eat. So there were all these other things that the society imposed that we were subjected to, but that I never had to have the talk with my parents.
Okay. And did you have any older brothers or sisters?
I'm an only child.
Oh, okay.
So what happened, we just grew up knowing almost subliminally that, you know, white people don't like us.
Okay.
And everything is separate.
Okay.
And but we are fine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, in Montgomery, everybody, our next door neighbor is an and all the neighborhoods were separate. It's an African American lady Dr. Evans, who had a PhD from the University of Michigan back in the 50s. That was a big deal. And oftentimes the people would go away to colleges, sometimes Big Ten colleges, northern white colleges, and they would come back and continue to help to improve the black community.
Mm-hmm.
And so people thought, you know, if you were smart, you could overcome all this stuff. And we weren't that far from Atlanta, which has always been a cultural mecca hub for black people, and educated black people, and then New Orleans on the other side, which was a cultural hub.
Yeah.
You know, so we always, there were always shining examples of black people who had overcome.
Talented 10th.
Right, the talented, that's right, Du Bois, bless his heart.
So it wasn't like a feeling of despair?
No,
because
it
you
wasn't
were
never a feeling of despair.
Okay.
I remember thinking, it was just a question, I'm going to college, but where?
Mm-hmm.
The issue was, where are you going? But you will go to college, and so many other people have done it.
Yeah.
And look at all these shining examples in the community, in this small town, of people who have gone away to college, gone away to graduate school, come back, they have helped the community, to the extent that by the time the mid-50s arrived and this young minister came to town, to Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, you know, from Morehouse College, and just about got his PhD. That was almost par for the course, because we had seen it. So many other people had done that. Like I said, on one side of me there was this African American lady with a PhD from the University of Michigan. On the other side was an African American male who was a tailor, and he had a tailor shop in downtown Montgomery, and he, you know, of course, clothed the wealthiest and everyone who wanted, you know, all men rather, who wanted their clothing, you know, adjusted, fit to a T. So, and all up and down the street that I live on, you have these wonderful, loving people who were positive role models. We didn't have, to my knowledge, homelessness. Okay. There were people who lived in what they called in those days shotgun houses. They were, you know, people who didn't have the means, but everybody had homes, everybody looked out for each other, you know, it didn't matter, you know, and we were just striving and living our normal lives, you know, and we were basically fine. Yet most people when I was growing up didn't have cars, not quite yet. The late 50s people were getting cars. So the buses were very important in Montgomery.
Okay. I do want you to sort of transition into that. Everyone famously knows Montgomery for the bus boycott. Yes. I mean, at least, I don't want to say everyone, because then I get back into assuming again. That's why we're having these conversations. So if you could just talk to us about the Montgomery bus boycotts. Obviously, you had a front row. I don't know if that's a sort of play on words for having a front row seat.
Right, that's true. Play on words.
But with the bus boycott, and obviously, I know as a little teaser about the historical Rosa Parks, and I always sort of look back and I bring it up to Prodigy and everything about how we got to have that fortunate visit at that bookstore in Oakland and actually actually see her and everything like that, and that's something that like
you saw Rosa Parks.
We were there.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, we all, me, you, my mom.
What was I there?
Yeah, you were there.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I've forgotten this. I'm so sorry.
We were all there. I can't even remember what year it was and everything like that.
So it was in the And sometimes in the 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you know her and everything.
But I didn't really know her, but I tell you what, she was a very good friend of my godmother's. They were in the same age group, and she was a lovely lady, and she lived up the street from me. I didn't actually know her, but I knew she had a sterling reputation.
Okay.
And godmother knew her well. As a matter of fact, today on that street where my father's house is, there is where she lived in her apartment. She lived in these projects. They keep the light on the front porch, even now in 2020. Okay. The light is on in her apartment. So when you pass by, people can say that's where Rosa Parks lives.
So does somebody live there, or is it more like a historical?
It's a historical place.
Oh, okay.
But she was a very well reputed, lovely, loving person. And like I said, my godmother knew her. And I remember I was a little girl. I was either in the first or second grade when the boycott started.
Okay.
And my meaningful memory, even though I was a little girl, was that the first night that Martin Luther King got arrested, my father got arrested with him that first night. So in his first book, Strides Toward Freedom, he mentioned the black school teacher who was arrested that night. And I remember my mother and Mrs. King were scurrying to get bail and all this stuff. But in his book, he couldn't mention my father's name or he would have been fired from his school teaching job. But they got arrested that night, protesting, fighting for civil rights. After that, we had the bus boycott, and they stopped the buses from coming in the black community. Yeah. But the black community had been the community that really supported the bus system. Yeah. So the bus system lost money during that year of the boycott.
But for those that don't really understand the public transportation aspect of it, the bus system was, like you had touched on before, many black people, I don't want to say virtually all black people at that time didn't have cars.
But many did.
Many didn't. So the main source of transportation to their job or wherever it is that they were going were through
downtown and all that.
Yeah, so to get groceries, you had to take the bus.
Yes. So it was a vital link. Did you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, but appreciating the brilliant strategic decision to take the actual economic impact on the actual system itself and say, we're going to remove our dollars from it. At a time
in the
when
1950s, the mid-90s.
You knew there was going to be a backlash. You knew that there was going to be additional threats for the entire community. But removing your money from it was so significant and so important that it had this lasting impact, and it wasn't by accident. It didn't. I don't like the mythology that Rosa Parks, got arrested and all the dominoes kind of fell in line.
No, you have to give us some inside baseball on that, because we just know the plain.
The
bus boycott. She told her to get back to the bus. Okay, the bus boycott, and most people don't. I had to. Embarrassingly, but I was like, I need to look up, because I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, it lasted
a year or 11 months, a year, just about. But what I remember, even though I was a little girl, was that. Like I said, the buses were vital to the black community. But people were being mistreated constantly on the bus. The bus drivers, all the bus drivers were white. They were constantly moved back. And see, the white people sat in the front of the bus, the black people had to sit in the back. And they would move back. If a white person got on and there were no more seats, you had to give up your seat. Mrs. Parks. And I didn't know this. My mother told me I was still too little. I saw a replica of what used to happen, and black people got on in the front, paid their money, then they had to get off, go to the back door to get on.
So they couldn't even walk by the...
Right, walk by the whites. So, and I said, my mother said, oh yeah, that was true. She said, you were a little girl and I shielded you. You didn't really know what was going on, but you put your money in, climb the stairs, pay, come down the stairs, go to the back door and enter.
Meanwhile, aren't some of them going to white people's houses to actually clean them?
Yes. Many of the people, right. Put it in context. They were going to clean other people's homes, but this is the way most people, this was their transportation, and this was it wasn't really accepted, but this is just the unwritten policy. Okay. So after that, people were very much mistreated. Now, even before, and like Celine just said, the strategy of it all, people kept complaining. And other people, and I've learned since then, in terms of educating myself, that the very first person before Mrs. Parks was a girl whose last name was Colvin,
Yep.
Colvin,
That's correct.
and she was a young girl, and they had kicked her off the bus. She tried to remain in her seat, and I don't know how many months ahead of Mrs. Parks or what, but now she is being celebrated for what she did.
Okay.
Go on.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
She was purposely not chosen to be the figure for that because she didn't have the stellar reputation that Rosa Parks had.
Oh, yes.
Rosa Parks,
Yes,
when you talk about the talented 10th, she had a clean record, she had a clean reputation.
She was very beloved.
She was very beloved, she was articulate,
Yes.
she was, nice looking. All of these things were carefully chosen with her rather than someone else who could be easily discredited as being low income and trashy or kids out of wedlock or
all those
doesn't dress well. Any of those social things were I don't want to discredit this other woman, but she wasn't as much of a shining example as Rosa Parks.
Right.
It's not fair to her that she gets excluded from the history.
But now she is being celebrated.
But I'm really glad to hear that. But I wanted to insert that.
Was more so her temperament was she wasn't going to take too much. The other lady, Colvin. I don't know her first name. I'm so sorry, but she wasn't. Mrs. Parks had also been, I think, the summer before, up to Tennessee to a special conference where they talked about and discussed nonviolence. And so she was prepared. And plus, there was the MIA, Montgomery Improvement Association, which was comprised of black people, the ministers, the lawyers, the doctors, and all of the quote-unquote middle-class people or upper middle-class people who were fighting in some way or other to help black people gain our civil rights. So Mrs. Parks that evening was just tired. She always said that. I was just tired. Even though, yes, she had a stellar reputation. She was she had been trained prior to that. She didn't know when she was going to be called upon. But the night they arrested her and the news flew through. I mean, you guys have the internet. But this was just word of mouth. I remember I was a little girl and all these things would happen. And the news flew through the community. All I heard was Miss Rosa got arrested. Miss Rosa got arrested. And then the dean of the Montgomery boycott was Mr. Ed Nixon. Proud, powerful black man who was, talk about stellar reputation, a strategist, intelligent, who actually was a person who started to strategize and organize, and he chose Martin Luther King to speak for the black community. Martin Luther King hadn't been in town that long.
Too young.
Yes, he was too young. And he didn't owe anybody anything. Yep. They couldn't say, well, you better pay this bill. What are you doing? You owe us and we'll charge you double interest. He was just new in town. He was educated. And Mr. Ed Nixon, who was the dean of the whole movement, appointed him. He said, you speak for us. You almost got your PhD. So we want you to be our spokesperson, and we're not going on these buses. We're tired of this. We're tired of the mistreatment. We're tired of this whole system. And the MIA, they started having, I remember this, mass meetings. Because my parents one would go to the mass meeting, and one would stay with me. And Mommy went to the mass meeting, and my father went to a mass meeting. And they had these mass meetings where the community came together at the churches. Okay. And they discussed the issues and they strategized and they listened to people. Now, part of Dr. King's strategy was nonviolence, which he adopted the philosophy of Mohandas Gandhi. And the idea was we have to be nonviolent. We want to affect change like Gandhi had done in India without ever firing a shot. So we're going to adopt this policy. Well, many people, go on.
I'm
that's okay, come on.
You know I don't mean to interrupt you. Okay. But the brilliance to be able to appreciate Gandhi and the Indian,
Uh-huh.
outnumbering the British
That's true.
50 to 1,
Yeah.
if not 100 to 1. Whereas it's the exact opposite. And you are the tiny ethnic minority in
Yes.
the States, but still applying the principles
Yes.
from that.
That's a good point.
That-
Excellent point.
Again, that takes someone with a PhD level of intelligence and understanding at a time when people are forcefully saying you don't have any intelligence because of the color of your skin.
Yes, yes.
You
That's
know.
right, Lynn.
But
That's
you
right.
can't. It wasn't a direct one-to-one relationship. You're like, oh, this
Right.
worked in India. Of course, it's going to work in
Right,
Alabama.
you're right. No, especially considering that hostile climate. Always, the hostility was always there. And I remember when I was a little girl, I was in a department store and they had a children's department. My mother was shopping, and there was a swing set. And I remember I kind of wandered a little bit away from my mother, not far, and I was kind of standing by the swing set, and then I touched it, and there was a little white girl there, and she was on the swing set. And then I was on the swing set, and I'll never forget this. Her mother looked up, saw her over there with me, and came and snatched her away. I'll never forget that. And that's embedded. And you know, oh, okay. And so that reality for me, I just thought of that. But anyway, getting back to the bus boycott era, what happened? Like Celine just referenced, no one knew that this was going to really be successful when we were outnumbered, but they underestimated us. You know, they didn't know we were strategists also. This black community that you've been shunning for centuries in Montgomery has been a black community that's just been thriving, you know, that's just been coming on its own, where people are getting educated. People know how to read and write. Many people, my mother said she didn't have any trouble when she went to register to vote in that county, Montgomery County. So you had black voters. Now, there was a county right next to Montgomery called Lowndes County where black people could not vote. It was very, very racist. Oh, it was horrible. But, so you had all of these people, all these years, we were underestimated, overlooked, derided, yet we were still rising. We were still thinking, competent adults and a community of these people. And so when they said, Dr. King speak, Ed Nixon said, Dr. King, you speak for us. And then you had all of these people, the ladies in Montgomery, the ladies who taught at the college, that was an historically black college there, Alabama State University. It used to be Alabama State College then. And it basically produced a lot of teachers in the state of Alabama. And so the ladies there, some of the teachers, mimeographed the flyers that said, do not ride the buses, do not ride the buses. And, you know, it was just a wonderful community effort where everybody came. And I was just a little girl, but I would just hear people were talking everywhere. And yeah, come on.
Can I ask a quick question? What did the older, I know you're talking about obviously your parents' generation as well. What did the even older generation, the people who were possibly at that time in their 50s and 60s,
that's right,
think about young Rosa Parks, young Martin Luther King, some of the other people. These are relatively young people in a, what I would think is a city and culture and state and a time period that doesn't value youthful organization as much as perhaps older people taking the lead. Can you talk about that dynamic?
You know, now from what I remember, I think the older people were very proud. They were proud of the younger people. They feared for them. There was a sense of, you know, I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. You know, the whole, but I'm proud that you're doing something needed to be done. And we're tired of the oppression. So they were silent, but an encouraging force. You know, a silent, encouraging force for that movement. And I'm trying to think, everybody in some way contributed. Now, this is what I remember that was totally delightful. Every black church, and there are many black churches in the South, every black church had a station wagon. because we couldn't ride the buses. And how are people going to get to their jobs? Those that don't have cars. Some people had cars. As a matter of fact, that's the time in which my parents actually bought a car during the bus boycott. And I remember every church had a station wagon. And if you saw, and I remember this, if you saw a black person walking, you picked them up in your own car. But each station wagon, each church had a station wagon, and we had a central location, and that's Mr. Posey's parking lot. This black man, Mr. Eddie Posey, had a parking lot in downtown Montgomery. And they turned his parking lot, and that was my girlfriend's friend. I went to school with his daughter from 1st grade through 9th grade, because she went away later to boarding school. But her daddy's, if we were downtown shopping during that year of the boycott, and you needed a ride home, or you needed a ride to the downtown area, you went to Mr. Posey's parking lot, and you waited, and then one of the station wagons picked you up from one of the churches. All these churches had station wagons, and it was your duty, because I was a little girl, I remember saying, "There's somebody, Mommy," and my mother was driving the car. We stopped. "Where you going?" "Well, we can get you close to that." I'm not quite going in that direction, but you were, there was a beautiful bond and unwritten law that said, we're all in this together, we're going to support each other, and one day we're going to get the victory.
Now you talk about, obviously it was a very well organized,
Yes.
peaceful movement and decision amongst the community to boycott the bus system. However, those of us that are students of our history know that people just weren't cool with that, based on what we saw in terms of white people watching the unification of black people.
Well, they didn't really watch it.
Some of
the powers that be.
It seems like people believe that, okay, we're watching these black people peacefully protest. All right, cool, that's fine. We'll leave them alone. Did you have any incidences where, and I sort of staged it like that because we've seen stories where white people in pickup trucks were throwing vegetables, eggs at black people that were walking and sort of calling them slurs and names and everything. Did you have any firsthand experiences?
No, I never had that firsthand experience.
Okay.
But I know that, like I said, if you saw a black person walking, you picked them up, you took them as close to where they were going, if not to their destination. But actually, the white community was preoccupied with itself.
Okay.
It really was, because they still had buses running in their neighborhoods. So they didn't care about the black community. Now the powers that be, the women who wanted their maids there and all of this stuff, and the bus company that's losing money, they were, negotiating somewhat, with the black community, with Dr. King, with Reverend Abernathy and all the powers that be. But by and large, I don't think the white community was really affected / concerned.
Okay.
Now, we were jubilant. I remember when the year had elapsed, I think it was December 1st of the next year, when they said the boycott is over. We can ride the buses and you can sit anywhere you want. I remember that. But I don't think the greater white community in Montgomery, especially those without any real means, who really weren't wealthy, I don't think they really cared. Now, one of the ironies was that there was a Lutheran church in Montgomery, a black Lutheran church, right up the street from my home where I grew up. The Lutheran Synod, because Catholic churches have dioceses, I think Lutheran churches are comprised of synods, sent a white pastor to a black Lutheran church in the South, in Montgomery, and Pastor Gertz. And he and his wife lived in the black community. And he was there. He was a part of the movement. He was a part of the boycott. And he and his wife had since moved back to Montgomery. The Lutheran church took them away. And then there was another family, the Durr family, I think it's spelled D-U-R-R, who were medical equipment people. They were, independent business people. They supported the boycott and supported people. And people now, there were black people who said, you know, I will contribute to the movement, you know. So I think, and then people from all over the world, Northerners, I say all of America contributed. But the negotiations and the strategizing was going on almost the entire year because they did not want to relinquish their power. They had lived well and lives for them that were, hey, this is the way we are and this is the way we want to be and it's always been this way and we're superior and all these other fallacies that they believed in that supported their way of life and their thinking. But once that happened, that was a major victory just to be able to ride the bus and sit where you wanted to sit.
When it became a sort of official that you could sit where you wanted to sit, did it change overnight, or were there still bus drivers that kind of went rogue and were just like, I don't care what the law says?
It changed overnight.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I don't recall. Now somebody else who's maybe older than me, but I don't recall it changed overnight. We rode the buses. We sat down where we want. As a matter of fact, I think in my neighborhood, because it was an all-black neighborhood, so people just got on the bus, and I don't remember seeing that many white people on the buses after that.
Okay.
Can I just add something, though, just a little bit greater context? We hear so much about the brilliance of the Harlem Renaissance in that, that era of the early part of the 20th century. We are starting to hear, thanks to HBO's Watchmen. I don't know if you've seen that, but I'll definitely show it to you.
Okay.
We're starting to hear a lot of people about, thanks to HBO's Watchmen, about Black Wall Street in Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
But what I'm trying to also connect here is the fact that Montgomery, Alabama has its own, on a smaller scale, sense of black intellectuals, black artists, black professionals, black strategic thinkers, organizing in a manner that's consistent with what's going on, obviously, and being celebrated, obviously, in Harlem, obviously what went on in Oklahoma, and there's many other bubbles of that, like in Atlanta, Georgia, and other communities.
Yes, Birmingham.
But that story hasn't really been told very well and effectively, that there are multiple black, for lack of a better phrase, multiple black mini Wakandas going on.
That's right.
That need to be appreciated.
Right, I agree. You know what happened, now, this is my particular philosophy. Wherever you had an historically black college, you had black intelligentsia, black middle class, and poor black people. So in all the cities in the South, if you had a black university there, a college, you had people who had attained a certain level of education. They had, how can I say it? They had gone away to big white colleges and come home to be a part of making things better, the struggle. So I'm thinking of places like Greensboro, of course, Atlanta. You had New Orleans, you had Baton Rouge, Southern University, wherever, Birmingham, they had Miles College. Hampton. Yeah, Howard and Hampton, wherever you had. So you had these people who were educated blacks who had attained a certain level of education, who, many of whom knew each other. They went to college with each other. My parents had friends, this one man had gone to Howard. He had friends all over the United States from the Howard experience. Where I went to school, Nashville, you had two black colleges. You had Fisk and Tennessee State. So you always had this sense of we can do it. And there are many of us who are intellectuals and who are here to just help and improve the community. Okay. So in the South, that was very, very apparent. And if you were bright, there was a doctor in my hometown whom a church, he was a bright young kid in the South with nothing. And his church, it was a Black Baptist church in Montgomery, sent him, because he was smart, to medical school. Yep. Can you imagine all these people in the church? They helped to pay his tuition because they were so proud of him. And, Norfolk, Virginia, too. You know, wherever you had a black college, you had these black intellectuals, these people who had gotten a lot of education, who had earned a lot of education, and who were there to help fight the good fight, the fight for civil rights.
So when you hear things like, or after the movie, sorry, I know I'm
No, jump in.
But you have this movie, Hidden Figures, coming out showing
Yes.
black female intellectual giants.
Yes.
Acting as being math wizards, being computers for NASA, putting someone on the moon. And people think that that's an oddity or so rare that it wasn't occurring.
Right.
It's because they don't have an appreciation for what was going on in and around these HBCUs.
That's right, Lynn. That's
for all of these, decades and decades, over 100 years, that were thriving. And I think even if you talk about some of the things like the Greek organizations, the church, obviously the church is being extremely important, but in conjunction with the schools, you have black intelligentsia thriving for years and years and years and doing so well that you can't discredit that.
Right. And remember, so in the 1800s, immediately after slavery, even my alma mater, Fisk University, was started in 1866, the year after the Civil War ended. And many of the other schools, because they had to, what are you going to do with all these people who are supposed to be free? They need to learn how to read and write. And then those who show promise, you continue to encourage them. And some of them, just attained all that they could attain academically. And, many traveled. They went to Europe, they went to Africa. And once the world wars in the early part of the 20th century had occurred, and the men had been away serving in World War II, and they come back and they're still belittled, and people calling them boy, and just insulting them, their intellect and all this after they fought. There was, I think, there was some let me put it this way, the climate was ripe for change, especially after World War II. You got, these GIs came back. They came back from World War I too, but that's my parents' generation. I don't know that. I know they came back from World War II. My parents and all of their friends, the men came back. The women had continued to go to college, and they made they made lives for themselves. They were quote unquote good colored people. They had brick homes. They had nice, neatly manicured lawns. They worshiped in church every Sunday. They bought the whole American dream hook, line, and sinker. But they had us, the baby boomers, my generation, your parents' generation. And we looked around and said, wait a minute.
This isn't
right. Things aren't right. Things aren't good. So we were, the baby boomers, we were part of Dr. King's movement.
Can you tell? Go.
Sorry. But what's funny to me is when you look at the late 1960s into the 70s, and you have immigrants coming from all over the world, and you get into the ethnic stereotype of model minority stuff, which is always a mythology and whatnot, and because they've let in a lot of people with highly educated, highly technical skilled backgrounds, nurses, doctors, etc., who do well. But when you look back just a generation prior in places that we've just discussed, you have black communities doing the exact same thing and getting zero credit for being a quote unquote model minority with your home, church going, manicured lawn, all of these other things that are viewed and praised in other communities. I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw that in.
You're right, because the immigrants came, again, I think there had been a massive, immigration in the 1800s, the Irish came over and all that. Those were in basically northern cities. In the South, you just had, I think, many of the people, they didn't care about ethnicity, to my knowledge, in the South, the deep South, in terms of the white community, you were just white. Now you had the Jewish community, and in my hometown there were some Greek people, but above all, the overarching what sentiment was, you're just white, and you have to pretend to be, or you have to put forth this veneer of being white and being superior.
And that came about, the Civil War changed that.
Yeah.
And then some of the things with Reconstruction and all of that,
Yeah.
that was on purpose in terms
Right.
of.
And Reconstruction,
Yeah.
which was just a Klan movement.
Yep.
And what happened, I remember just,
We're-
no, that's
we're
okay.
all over the place.
Right, but that's okay. But in my reading, and what they started doing too was putting up these Confederate monuments and stuff. This was supposed to intimidate us. They're celebrating, I remember in 1965, in the early 60s, they were celebrating 100 years after the Civil War, a war that they lost. But what happened, white Southerners, right there in Montgomery, they decided, we're going to dress like the period of the Civil War. So these men wore beards, the women would have on long dresses, and they were just reenacting a time that they didn't live through necessarily, but they wanted to celebrate because it's the Southern way, and with all the Southern accent. And it was ridiculous. Now, the black people at the time, we were laughing at them. Why are they dressed like this? Why are they doing this? A war you lost. But see, I just found this out this year, and all the commotion of 2020. I just found out that many of the slaveholders told, especially that President Andrew Johnson, who was horrible after Lincoln, Grant, and I think Andrew Johnson, or vice versa, but he was after Lincoln, and he had Southern sympathies. The slaveholders said, you freed our property, you pay us for our property,
Yes.
meaning the slaves.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
No, it's
So they
reparations for them.
they got money for our ancestors. Oh, and many of our ancestors, if they tried to move away from the South to get away from all of that, but indeed, many stayed because of family ties and stuff. And hey, that's how I got a chance to be part of the civil rights. When I was a teenager, go back.
Well, as the civil rights movement progressed from the bus boycott, and in terms of getting like actual equal rights, as Dr. King progressed and became more of a national figure. How did from your point of view, how did you go about observing that? I mean, how was that watching him come into from Montgomery and then all of a sudden becoming this national
figure? Yeah, he would be on television. So few black people on TV who say Dr. King's on TV. But I think within a year after the boycott, the success of the boycott, Dr. King moved back home to Atlanta. Maybe about a year later. And I think his father needed him at Ebenezer Baptist Church or whatever. And he really had outgrown Montgomery. He was not in his heart because he was always near and dear to the people. But he just said there was a larger fight to fight.
Right.
And so he was from Montgomery. And it's funny too, many of the men, James and Chris and Darian would appreciate that, who were professors at Alabama State in Montgomery were Morehouse men. They came to help black people. There was a spirit of helping each other that was just beautiful. So he went back to his base with all of this national renown and his intelligence, and so he just moved back to Atlanta. And Montgomery was left to continue fighting other fights of inequality, voter registration, and then the Vietnam War was there, and in the late 60s, because at that time, if you were male and you weren't in college, you went to Vietnam. You got out of college. You could get a deferment for medical school or the NFL. They were moving into the NFL, but otherwise you went to Vietnam to fight. And that's the infamous time when Muhammad Ali said, no, I'm not going over there. I'm a minister of Islam, and I don't believe in that. And they tried to absolutely obliterate him.
on a sad note, talking about being sort of erased and obliterated. When you found out about Dr. King's assassination?
I was in college.
Okay, how did that play out for you? Where, if you could just tell us about, I mean, we've as Prodigy and I are the same age. We've seen several historical things happen with like 9/11.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
in the Bay Area. I mean, the earthquake of '89 is something that sticks out to me. And I was living in Louisiana when Hurricane Katrina happened. So those like little push pin marks are always something like I remember specifically happening. But we obviously weren't around when Dr. King was assassinated. And when I had talked to my mom about it, you could just tell the sadness, but I guess the feeling around her was that unfortunately they kind of had a feeling that it was coming based on just how people were just acting, and they knew that they were fearful that day would come.
Yes, that's
and
true.
Unfortunately it just seemed like it didn't. As shocking and as very sad as it was, I don't know if you could.
Well, let me say
impending
this.
doom that might have been coming.
Well, it wasn't foremost in anybody's mind.
Right.
But once he broadened his scope to include poor people in America and the anti-war sentiment, because the anti-war sentiment was growing, plus civil rights. Dr. King was stepping on toes. Now, I didn't have a sense that he would be assassinated, but I tell you what, the Black Power movement was coming about.
Okay.
And this was, we were saying, and even on college campuses, that Stokely Carmichael and people like that were saying, wait a minute, we have bent over backwards and we're still being crushed. And it's about black power. And what they were really talking about was black economic power. It wasn't about...
That's an important distinction.
Yes, right, Celine. Right, because people... what did I just read today? Saying... when we say Black Lives Matter, the response, all lives matter, is like telling a woman... what's the analogy? It's like telling a woman, if you dress properly, then you won't get raped. That's how ridiculous that whole argument is. So what happened, we were, Vietnam lasted until 1975. But between the period of, there was social unrest. The night Dr. King died, there was in 1968, there was social unrest. They were ready to burn this country down because they said, you took a man of peace. He never did anything to harm anybody. All he wanted to do was promote civil rights for everyone. And they assassinated him. People were through. They were ready to tear the cities down from, I remember, Newark, New Jersey, LA out here. I'm trying to think of I was in Nashville. Nashville, they had a small riot. They were just angry and all the pent-up emotion that you could kill an innocent man who stood for peace and nonviolence. That he could be so murdered. So, woo!
And was it the pent-up anger when that happened? Was that both white people and black people, or was it okay?
Mainly black, but many whites who empathized. And see, '68 was a pivotal year. You had Martin Luther King's assassination. You had Robert Kennedy's assassination. Martin Luther King died April 4th. Bobby Kennedy, I think, was June 6th or something. In LA. And you had this it was a violent year. Plus now the war is still raging. People are being drafted. So the country was really in turmoil. And then Nixon, I think, got elected. You guys think, this man 45. So we got Nixon, who was just absolutely anti-black people, anti-progress, anti-civil rights. We couldn't believe it when he got elected. Everybody was like, huh?
California.
Yes. Lord, you guys. It's been a tumultuous fight. There have been times when we have, there was despair and anger, in 68, there's despair and anger in 2020.
Yes.
Not that unrelated, the whole idea that, because really your life doesn't matter. And now we got police forces that are comprised of the Ku Klux Klan, because that imperial wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, said, we have the police departments. So you got all these people who want to kill black males, just, who feel they have free reign, but I'm just praying that they have to go through trial and that we get fair juries and that they have to stand, trial for what they have done. And that culture of that blue code, is that what they call it?
Talk about like the blue wall of silence.
Silence, yes.
Yes.
That can be demolished.
As we progress to more of like a now more of a recent time, I wanted to ask this question earlier. Did you have any personal experiences with the police growing up where you felt fearful? A lot of people say that they had this internal fear of police being pulled over because of either past incidents or what they've seen on TV. Did you have any personal stories?
Had any. One night, it was funny. Mommy was bringing me back from dancing lessons, and this cop stopped us and tried to say she didn't come to a full stop. And she had a car full of young girls, children, and they were, yes, you did. He talked to her very derisively, but she held her ground. She had to get her ticket, but then we went home. I didn't have any personal interaction except one day before we had the Selma Montgomery March in 65. Was that the day we went so that we could get the injunction in order to march? Because after Bloody Sunday in Selma, when they attempted to march, and you've seen all that footage, beating down John Lewis and all those original marchers.
Wasn't Bernie there too?
Who?
Was Bernie there too?
Oh, Bernie Sanders. I'm not sure, he might have been. I know he was a part of it. Okay.
I don't want to say.
I don't know if he was there that day. But what happened, so after that, Dr. King and the strategist says, okay, we need to get an injunction so that we can march. We're going to have a march from Selma to demand our civil rights. So the day we got the injunction to have the march, my friends and I, all the high school kids left school and we marched in the street to go to the Capitol. It wasn't the Capitol, it was a city building to get this injunction. And Dr. King was there. But he told us, we were high school kids, and he said, it's not just about being out of school today. You have a purpose. So I'll never forget, they told us, everyone, we have SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, members on the front porches of all these houses. You go to a porch and you learn about what we're doing and how we want to do it nonviolently. And my friends and I went to a porch, and there was the first time I'd ever seen a black Catholic priest. I think his name was Father Clement from Chicago. He had come down and he talked to us and he said, oh, you guys, I see your uniforms, you're from Catholic school. We said, yeah. And he said, so understand we want to be nonviolent. We just want to get this injunction, and then the people are going to march from Selma. So then they were all, so we weren't just here to be, we weren't there to be silly, giddy, unfocused. We had to be focused. And so that day we marched downtown to some municipal building, and Dr. King went in. And it started to rain. This was spring in the South, so you get showers. We were out there in the rain, just standing there, and he came out and he waved the paper. Like, we got the injunction, so we will have this march from Selma. Then it became a movement. All people from all over the world came and marched, took part a little bit, from Selma to Montgomery. When they got to Montgomery, they camped out on my high school grounds, the grounds of the Catholic school I went to from first grade through 12th grade. And that night, before the march to the Capitol the next morning, we had a concert. There was Sammy Davis Jr., Tony, first time we'd ever seen movie stars in person. Sammy Davis Jr., Tony Bennett, Harry Belafonte. Who else? We had a concert. They put up a stage, and who else was there? I think there was an actress, Shelley Winters. Was Paul Newman there? Paul Newman could have been there, but all these movie stars descended on Montgomery. And then the next day we went and we, that's when we got the injunction. Then, no, that was when they got to, they got an injunction and all that. When they got to Montgomery, all the marchers, Dr. King, Mrs. King, Reverend Abernathy, Andrew Young, everybody was there. Almost Stokely Carmichael was there in Montgomery that night. So, you guys, it's been a whirlwind.
Yes. How, and let's sort of come toward the closing parts of the interview. I mean, we could go all day, but obviously we have this curfew issue.
Yeah, that's right, you guys.
Yeah. With everything going on right now, with somebody with as much experience as you have, being firsthand with the original civil rights movement,
right.
How do you feel we can improve? That's sort of been, I've been asked that question from even some of my white friends and stuff, because they see everything that's going on right now, and they want to know what can we do, what can people do, or because you hear talk about people saying that we've done it non-violently and peaceful marches and everything, and our ancestors and parents got hosed, dogged, and they did sit-ins and getting punched in the back of the head while they're just trying to sit in at a diner, and you're not listening. Those people, I mean, everyone quotes Martin Luther King, but can we get him for an interview today? No, because you shot him.
Right, you shot him, right.
So you hear a lot of people saying, we've been asking, we've been yelling, and people have kind of gotten tired of that, and a lot of people are being violent towards property. That aspect is sort of been brought into to try to get your attention as it's being put. Not to say that either of us agree with that aspect of it, but that seems to be the sort of philosophy. But most importantly, what is it that you feel can help be constructive to continuing the progress that your generation started out?
Yeah, you know what I think? I think hearts have to change now, because now all of a sudden they're saying, oh, we should have listened to Colin Kaepernick. Oh, we should have, oh, Colin Kaepernick was right. Oh, he wasn't violent. He wasn't protesting the flag of America. He was saying, hey, police brutality is an issue, and it continues to exist, and it's unfair, and we need to change this mentality. And so hearts have to change now. People have to be, we've had, your generation, you guys lived with integration. You guys went to schools where everybody was present. You guys got a chance to do almost everything you wanted to do, and even in that, there were probably still some racist people who would yell or hit you guys with slurs or anything like that. So now, we've got to continue to fight. We've got to weed out these people who are trying to infiltrate in order to divide and conquer. Like they showed many of these looters the other day were white looters who are part of white supremacist groups just trying to discredit the movement. I'm not saying they were all white, but definitely people have to understand it. When we say Black Lives Matter, the response is not all lives matter. If all lives really mattered, we wouldn't have to say Black Lives Matter.
Sure.
I don't see anybody else getting killed like black men are being killed. Why are you threatened because we say Black Lives Matter? That's your insecurity. We're still trying to fight for our equality. So it's now a question of hearts changing and people having to realize that, race is a human construct. God created everybody. But we've decided, people decided that this race is superior to that race and all these other constructs, when you really have to realize that, is it?
No, I was just checking to make sure it was still recording.
Okay. Well, we have to realize that it's a question now of the heart. Your heart has to change. You have to be willing to listen, dialogue, be open-minded, receive people for who they are, and stop, buying into the myth of white supremacy. You know, this thing is crazy now. You know, and maybe it's, as Will Smith said about the whole thing about, no, this has always been happening. It's being filmed now. So with all the filming that we see this going on, we really get a chance to see this ugly underbelly where these people really believe somehow or another that because of the color of their skin, they're superior.
Mm-hmm.
And so you say, okay. And more of them are that way than we really know.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're really seeing now. And they're part of it too is backlash because Obama was a president, a black intelligent man with his wife, his children. They were decent people, thinking people, intellectual people who tried to help the country move forward in a positive way. And people resented that, you know, because they couldn't just try to belittle him. He violated all the stereotypes. And then people got mad. I'm mad. I don't like him. He's not. I can't look down on him and say, you know, I'm better than you. No, he and his wife had all the education. They had the dedication to humanity, to helping people, to, you know, and so you're mad. Where was that something I read where they said, oh, black people have to understand, we suffered 8 years under Obama. No, you didn't suffer. He did not make you suffer. He was trying to improve things. And another thing I read, and this, I think I'm going to close with this. How can I say this? When Obama was president, he tried to be everybody's president. He was very intelligent. He tried to show love and compassion to all. But the prevailing mentality today is we'd rather have a dumb idiot to lead us. That's where it's going now. Someone who doesn't really care about us and is all about greed than a black president who tried to give us health care. And that's where I'm going to end. Because, you know, look at this. So you'd rather have this dummy up here, this hardcore racist, and was another president, and they still don't have the health care, you know, because the originator of the idea was a black man.
Yes.
It's crazy. So you bite up your nose to spite your face.
Yeah.
What's that? You know,
throw the baby out with the
bathwater.
bathwater.
Right. Because you're hard-hearted. So like I said, it's about a change of heart. But people don't want to change their hearts because they want to believe I'm superior.
Yeah. Well, this was awesome.
Oh,
Even better than I expected. We have to make this like a several part series just going down the history line because I have so many questions and everything because I want to.
We can do it again whenever y'all want.
Absolutely, because I want to go further down the line and understand some of the stuff with like the Black Panthers and just everything. Even like because when did you come to California?
I came to California in 1970.
Okay.
The Black Panthers were here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, because we will do a whole another little
right,
podcast.
Because they tried to paint them as somehow, they're horrible.
Yes.
No, they were demanding respect, and they were serving the black community. They gave breakfast to poor kids. They had books. They were doing so many great things. But the dominant media tried to say, they're horrible people. Yes. Because one time they did. Wait,
they
went in Sacramento with their guns, and ta-da, the NRA says, we need a little gun control now. Black men had guns.
Yes. We will definitely.
We gotta go.
We will get into that and everything because that will just be amazing. And yes.
And there's one other thing I want to touch on maybe more next time. One of the things I appreciate so much about you and my dad raising me was looking a little bit more at the diaspora.
Yes.
And I remember being 10, 11 years old and being aware of things going on in South Africa.
That's right, because we took you to see Nelson Mandela. Yes.
Understanding that what was going on in the 60s with civil rights, and then literally while I was in junior high and high school, apartheid slowly starting to come down.
Yes.
Was eye-opening for me, and making that connection between the diaspora of Black experience in a majority Black country on the continent of Africa versus America as well, and the treatment of Black people, and how that struggle is united, and the support that was going on here in this country. That story hasn't been told very well in the mainstream media of the pressure that Black Americans put on the U.S. government when they were calling Nelson Mandela a terrorist. Stuff with Patrice Lumumba we could also talk about. But even Marcus Garvey, there's things that get left out of history that are connected in the diaspora. That's right. And we can't just only focus on America too. Yes, that's right. I just want to mention that.
Right. The whole the diaspora, South Africa, and we're not. I remember when Daddy and I got married, we didn't buy diamonds. We didn't have diamond wedding. I didn't have a diamond wedding ring because we said, no, we're boycotting the diamonds, the way they're treating Black people. The news still got out. The news still got out. And they tried to suppress it and all that. But we knew. And remember, South Africa could not participate in the Olympics. All because of the horrible treatment of Africans in South Africa by these Afrikaners. And you guys, and that's why I want you to go and take the kids. I want you to go take your baby and babies, because when you go to South Africa, it's such a beautiful place, and the people are so beautiful. And when I went in 2006, Madiba, Nelson Mandela, was still alive. And it was the month of July, and they were celebrating his birthday, and it was just wonderful. And we were saying, Auntie Yvette and Janae and I, we were saying, you know, if anybody should have hatred toward these people, toward white people, these southern white, not southern, these South African whites, it should be these people. But Mandela, kind of like Martin Luther King, embraced the spirit, and the word was Ubuntu, which means forgiveness, reconciliation, love. And because of that, the people tried to coexist and get along with these white South Africaners. And they were doing it somewhat successfully. I was there for 2 weeks. The last week, just before we left, maybe 2 nights before we left, somewhere in the northern part of South Africa, we heard on the news that some Afrikaner farmer said that the Black police better not come on his property. He'd shoot them. Oh, boy. I know. So we said, it's time to go home. But you're right, Lynn, that whole diaspora, because that movement of freeing South Africa, it was very, very important. We didn't not want to support apartheid. And what I want you guys to do when you go to South Africa, you have to go to the museum, because it's a whole lesson. And give you some more than one day. Remember, there's at least 2 days in the Apartheid Museum. Okay. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. And the people are so warm and loving, but they've lived through so much too.
This is our lifetime.
Yes,
that's the part that,
that's right.
When I talk to my son, your grandson, and granddaughter about it, I can tell them, oh, I was in junior high or high school when apartheid fell.
And that's right. And
it should have been an even bigger deal. People talk about the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Yeah.
This apartheid falling was the fall of the white supremacy Berlin Wall in South Africa. Yes. And I know we'll go into it at another time, but that connection just needs to be told about how much awareness was going on over here that helped with that.
Yes, because of Miriam Makeba, the singer, and Hugh Masekela, that was her husband at one point. And the word, like I said, you guys have the internet, but somehow or another the word always got out about South Africa. I mean, to the extent all around the world, you had, all kind of activists and showbiz people who supported it. And we said, we will not support this regime. The treatment and when we got down there and just saw what these people had lived through, we said, my goodness, you just, And even you guys, there's one section where they show what happened. They were mining, the Africans were working in the mines, and the dehumanization they tried to perpetrate on those people as they're working in these diamond mines, and you're gonna, De Beers and all these corporations are gonna profit, and these people were just horribly treated, stripped of their clothing, examined like you've hid a diamond in your mouth, in your throat, in all your crevices. Oh, it was horrible. And you see all that in the museum that tells a story. It's so fascinating that, see, we only allowed one day to go to that museum, and we were running to the souvenir shop and we said, oh, but we should have had 2 days just there. And but somehow or another, those people are so loving and good. And I love Trevor Noah, one of the favorite sons there, who is just a wonderful, who has moved here.
Have you read his book yet?
Yes. Yeah. Wait. I not only read the book, I listened to him reading it.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I laughed
pretty
so. Yeah, it is great. You read it too?
No, I need to. But hearing him read it would be.
Oh yeah.
It'd be great.
Books on. Please do. When I was in Mexico, that's when I said, "Oh, my born crime." That's right. So so much and stuff has gone on, and another place that's not free even today is Brazil, when 44% of the population, more than here, looks more like us.
Of course.
But they have.
They have a problem with killing a lot of activists.
Yep.
Sorry,
we can go
this is going to have to be a continuing thing about like real Black history lessons or something like that. That might be the name of what we call it or whatever.
Right. But thank God you guys are so well read and so up to date and so
Well, it's also take a bow, take credit for it, because obviously it's my childhood living down the road from you. Yeah. I learned so much through you and just being firsthand. Yeah. I always tell people I try to speak with the most proper grammar ever in my life, because I knew my mom had free reign to just be like, yeah, you can smack them upside the head. Right. It brought me such a long way, and it's something that I definitely I talk to my wife about it all the time, and I want to pass it on to my children, the importance of reading, speaking. I think it's something that just goes, it just doesn't get talked about enough, and I think you can go much further in life just being able to be well-spoken and being able to articulate yourself. Right. I think it's such an underrated skill, and I thank you.
Thank my mom. Remember my mother Lydia, she was the grammarian, and I think I just picked it up through osmosis, and then Salim is carrying it on to Logie and Reese. Because mommy, being an old school teacher, believed every child can learn and everyone can speak standard English. Yes. There are times when you lapse into vernacular or slang, but above all, you need to be able to speak and write standard English.
Right.
Period.
Well, that will wrap it up with Black and Black Times Infinity's real Black history lessons. And yeah, we'll come back and we'll get some more topics and everything, and I try to figure out another little lesson plan where we can get educated on some stuff. So thank you so much.
All right. Yes. Bye, you guys. I love it.